Wait, don't spend that penny just yet. What if I told you that some of the most ordinary-looking coins in your pocket could actually be hidden money makers? Today on Change Your Life, we're uncovering the truth behind the top 3 Lincoln Shield pennies that collectors are quietly searching for right now. The coins we're looking at today include 2022 Lincoln Shield Penny, D. Denver, 2016 Lincoln Shield Penny, no mint mark, 2019 Lincoln Shield Penny, no mint mark. At first glance, these pennies look completely normal, worn, dirty, and everyday pocket change. But some versions hide rare mint mistakes, special strikes, and high-value conditions that can turn a simple penny into something worth serious money. And here's the crazy part. Some collectors pay hundreds or even thousands of dollars for the right one. So before you ignore or spend your pennies, stick around, because one of these might already be in your collection. Let's jump into coin number 1. Stop. Don't scroll past this like you always do. Because the 2022 D. Lincoln Shield Penny from the United States Mint is one of those coins that exists so quietly in everyday life that people don't even realize how often they actually see it. It is in your pocket change. It is in store counters. It is in vending machines. It is in jars at home. It is everywhere and still completely ignored. Not because it is rare, but because it feels too normal to matter. And that is where the entire story begins. At first glance, it looks like something your brain has already classified. A standard modern penny. Copper-plated zinc surface. Slight dullness caused by circulation. Tiny scratches from daily handling. A design so familiar that your mind doesn't even bother analyzing it anymore. It just passes it, automatically, without thought, without curiosity. And that is the real problem. Because familiarity is powerful, but dangerous. It makes you believe you already understand something, even when you don't. Now imagine something different. Same coin, same 2022 penny. But this time, you slow everything down. No rushing, no distraction, no automatic thinking, just observation. On the front, the portrait of Abraham Lincoln appears. Most people recognize it instantly and move on without a second thought. But when you actually stop and look carefully, your perception begins to change slightly. You start noticing engraved lines that you never cared about before. The depth of the design, the texture created by modern minting technology, the subtle variations caused by wear over time. Then you flip it. Union Shield. Strong, structured, symbolic. A design that represents unity, repeated across billions of coins in circulation. And this repetition creates something interesting in the human mind. It creates illusion. The illusion that everything is identical. That nothing changes. That there is nothing to see beyond what you already know. But here is where curiosity begins to form. Because coins produced by the United States Mint are manufactured under extremely controlled, high-speed processes. Every coin is struck using precise machinery. Every detail is standardized. Every design is meant to be uniform across millions of pieces. But even in systems designed for perfection, perfection does not truly exist in physical reality. There are always micro-variations. Always. Not visible immediately, not obvious to the naked eye, but present inside the system. A slight difference in strike force. A tiny variation in how metal spreads during minting pressure. A subtle shift in surface reflection depending on die condition, temperature, or production batch timing. These variations are not dramatic errors. They are not obvious defects. They are microscopic differences hidden inside something that looks completely normal. And that is exactly why nobody notices them. Because nobody is looking for them. Now pause here. Because this is the point where reality needs to be clear. A 2022 D. Lincoln Shield penny in dirty, worn, heavily circulated condition is not a $1 million coin. It is not a hidden treasure. It is not something that will suddenly change your life overnight. It is mass-produced currency. Billions of pieces exist. Most of them remain at face value unless they contain rare minting errors or exist in exceptional uncirculated condition. But that is not the real meaning of this coin. The real meaning is perception. Because the moment you start observing something ordinary with real attention, it stops being ordinary in your mind. You begin to notice things you completely ignored before. You start questioning things you assumed were already understood. You realize how often the human brain filters out details simply because it is familiar. And slowly, your awareness begins to shift without you even realizing it. Now, every coin you hold feels slightly different. Not because the coin changed, but because your attention changed. And that is the turning point. Because once attention changes, everything changes. Even the smallest object stops being just an object. It becomes something you analyze, something you question, something you actually see instead of just pass. And that is where curiosity lives. Not in rarity, not in value, but in awareness. Because the truth is simple, but most people never realize it. Most things are not hidden from us. We are just too fast to notice them, too distracted to observe them, too familiar to question them. And when you finally slow down enough to actually look properly, even a simple 2022 penny stops being just change in your hand and becomes a reminder that reality is always more detailed than we assume. We just rarely take the time to see it. Stop. Before you ignore this coin like it's nothing special, you need to actually look at it properly. Because the 2016 Lincoln Shield Penny, no mint mark, from the United States Mint, is one of those modern coins that lives a completely invisible life. It passes through millions of hands every single day. It gets spent without thought. It gets stored without care. It gets mixed with other change. And in that constant movement, it becomes something people completely overlook. Not because it is rare, but because it looks too normal to question. At first glance, it feels simple. A standard modern penny. Copper-plated zinc composition. Light wear from circulation. A design that has been repeated so many times that the brain stops treating it as something worth attention. And that is where the illusion begins. Because when something becomes familiar, people assume they already understand it. Now imagine something different. Same coin, same 2016 penny. But this time, you actually slow down and observe it like you've never seen it before. No rushing, no distraction, just focus. On the front, the portrait of Abraham Lincoln appears. Most people recognize it instantly and move on. But when you actually study it closely, small details start to appear. Engraved texture, fine line depth, slight variations created by mass production and repeated striking over millions of coins. Then you flip it. Union Shield. Strong, structured, symbolic. A design repeated across billions of pennies in circulation. And here's where something interesting happens in the mind. Repetition creates blindness. When you see something too often, your brain stops analyzing it and starts auto-processing it. That is why most people never notice anything unusual, even when something is right in front of them. But let's go deeper. Coins produced by the United States Mint are made under extremely high-speed industrial minting systems. Every coin is struck with precision tools. Every design is standardized. Every output is meant to be consistent across massive production runs. But here is the part most people never think about. Even in systems designed for uniformity, perfection does not exist. There are always micro-variations. Not obvious ones, not dramatic ones, but real ones. A slight difference in strike pressure during minting. A tiny variation in metal flow while the coin is being formed. A subtle change in surface reflection depending on die condition, usage, and production timing. These differences are so small that casual eyes will never notice them. And that is exactly why they remain hidden in plain sight. Now pause here for a reality check. A 2016 Lincoln Shield penny with no mint mark in dirty, worn, heavily circulated condition is not a $1 million coin. It is not a hidden treasure. It is not something that will change your life overnight. It is mass-produced currency. Billions were made. Most of them are only worth face value unless they contain rare minting errors or exist in exceptional uncirculated condition. But that was never the real point of this coin. The real point is something deeper. Awareness. Because the moment you start observing something ordinary with real attention, it stops feeling ordinary. You begin noticing things you ignored for years. You start questioning what you assumed was already known. You realize how often the brain filters out detail just because something feels familiar. And slowly, your perception begins to shift. Now every coin in your hand feels slightly different. Not because the coin changed, but because your attention changed. And that is where curiosity truly begins. Because once curiosity activates, even the most common object stops being just an object. It becomes something you analyze, something you question, something you actually see instead of just passing by. And that is the real reason coins like this get attention again. Not because they suddenly became valuable, but because people finally started looking properly. And maybe the biggest discovery was never inside the coin. It was inside the way we were looking at it all along. Stop. Don't ignore this coin like it's just another piece of pocket change. Because the 2019 Lincoln Shield Penny, no mint mark, from the United States Mint, is one of those modern coins that almost everyone has seen, but very few people have actually noticed. It moves through daily life silently. It gets spent in stores. It gets dropped in jars. It gets forgotten in drawers. And because it looks so normal, it never gets a second thought. Not because it is rare, but because it feels too common to question. At first glance, it looks completely ordinary. A standard modern penny. Copper-plated zinc surface. Slight dulling from circulation. Small scratches from everyday handling. A design so familiar that the brain instantly classifies it as just change and moves on. And that is where the illusion starts. Because familiarity is powerful, but it also blinds you. Now imagine something different. Same coin. Same 2019 penny. But this time, you don't rush past it. You actually slow down and observe it like it's the first time you've ever seen it. On the front, the portrait of Abraham Lincoln appears. Most people recognize it instantly and move on without thinking. But when you really focus, details begin to emerge. The fine engraving lines. The depth of the relief. The texture created by high-speed mass production. Subtle marks that only become visible when attention replaces assumption. Then you flip it. Union Shield. Strong. Structured. Repeated across billions of coins. And here is where something strange happens in the mind. Repetition creates invisibility. When your brain sees something too often, it stops analyzing it. It starts auto-processing it. That is why most people never question coins they see every day. Not because there is nothing to see, but because the brain has already decided there is nothing new. But now comes the deeper question. If millions of coins are made under the same system, are they truly identical in every microscopic detail? Coins produced by the United States Mint are manufactured under extremely controlled conditions. High-speed minting presses, precision dies, standardized designs. Everything is built for consistency. But here is what most people never realize. Even perfect systems are not truly perfect. There are always tiny variations. Not visible immediately, not noticeable casually, but still present. A slight difference in strike pressure during minting. A tiny variation in how metal spreads across the die. A subtle shift in surface reflection depending on wear, production timing, and handling conditions. These are not errors you can easily point out. They are microscopic differences hidden inside ordinary coins. And that is exactly why they stay invisible. Because nobody is looking for them. Now let's pause for reality. A 2019 Lincoln Shield penny with no mint mark in dirty, worn, heavily circulated condition is not a $1 million coin. It is not a hidden fortune. It is not something that will change your life overnight. It is mass-produced currency. Billions exist. Most examples remain at face value unless they contain rare mint errors or exist in exceptional uncirculated condition. But that was never the real story. The real story is perception. Because the moment you start paying attention to something ordinary, it stops being ordinary. You begin to notice details you ignored before. You start questioning what you thought you already understood. You realize how often the brain filters reality without permission. And slowly, your awareness shifts. Now, every coin in your hand feels slightly different. Not because the coin changed, but because your attention changed. And that is where curiosity begins to grow deeper. Because once curiosity activates, even a simple penny stops being just a penny. It becomes a question you didn't ask before, a question that stays in your mind longer than expected. And that is why coins like this keep coming back into attention, not because they suddenly became valuable, but because people finally started seeing them properly. And maybe the biggest discovery was never inside the coin. It was in the way we stopped looking at it in the first place.